Well, thank you so much for taking this time out, Mr. Azren. I'm so grateful.
All good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Alrighty, so I'm just going to ask you just a few questions and for our audience because we are about a global mindset and I think sometimes people fail to realize that culture and language they're all wrapped up into one. And so um, you seem to be extremely well traveled. I follow you on your platforms, especially YouTube, which I absolutely love. And so, but I want my audience to know, tell me, who is Azren?
So I live in Canada. I'm born and raised here. My family's from India. And actually, that's not 100% true. Roots are all from India, but they haven't. But people haven't been born in India for a while. So my dad's side is born in Fiji. The roots are from southern India. Mom's side is born in Uganda. The roots are again from more northern India. And now
Mhm.
most of the family is now in Canada.
So
So
now, with your ancestors being from Uganda, um, do you speak Swahili by any chance? Do you have just a little bit of smidgen of Swahili, or?
not really, because we're pretty Indian. We're quite Indian, despite my grandparents being born and raised in Uganda. Like we're quite Indian. There are certain words that we use when we speak in Gujarati, which is the language that my family speaks. There are certain words that we say in Swahili.
Uh-huh.
Now, what's interesting though is that when you look at, now I'm not an expert on this topic, but from my understanding, when you look at Uganda and their linguistic situation, they've never really been a country that has where Swahili has been widespread, where
Mm-hmm.
that is the language of the country. To my
Okay.
knowledge, it is not the case,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
unlike some of its other neighboring countries.
So now, with your background, do you also speak Punjabi and Hindi? No. Okay.
Not, no, I speak Gujarati. It's weird to have someone who only speaks Gujarati and not Hindi. That's not common, actually.
Okay. Okay.
Usually people speak Gujarati and Hindi because when you're in India, if you're born and raised in Gujarat, you'll obviously speak Gujarati because that's the language of that region. But it's those people they usually actually always if let's say always maybe there's a couple odd people who don't, but generally they speak Hindi as well because the media is in Hindi. In school they learn Hindi. They if they go to a different region in India, Hindi's kind of needed. Not to mention Gujarati and Hindi are very similar. All the
Mm-hmm.
Bollywood movies there are regional films and movies that are in Gujarati, Punjabi, whatever the language is, but a lot of the top Bollywood movies tend to be in Hindi. So
Mm-hmm. It just depends.
um,
Awesome.
yeah,
Okay. So now, with your background with languages, now, because some people think, especially here in North America, they just consider, well, if you know one, it's easy, which I have to say I tend to somewhat believe that, but it's still a sheer effort. So tell me about some of your challenges with language learning and how do you overcome them? Because you're a polyglot at this point.
for sure. So
Mhm.
I think for me, some of the hardest thing. That's a good question. I think for Gujarati, for example, the biggest challenge is lack of infrastructure for learning.
Okay. Mhm.
What I mean by that is for every other language I have learned or I currently am learning, I can find classes, I can find university programs, I can find study abroad programs, I can go to the country and do things there. I can find videos on YouTube, I can find textbooks if I ever needed it. There are lots of resources, and let's use the word infrastructure. I think it's infrastructure
Right.
where you could enter an infrastructure and achieve a certain level of fluency through that particular class, school, or program.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
Gujarati, those are not quite as common. It's
Okay.
much more difficult,
Mhm.
seeing as it's not, I suppose, as popular of a language to learn as, for instance, French or Spanish or English
Uh-huh.
or things of that nature. So
Mhm.
that's a challenge. I haven't fully overcome it, to be honest. I think some of the things that I did to overcome were, and they worked, would
Mhm.
have been still looking for those resources. Just because they're less, it doesn't mean they're not existent. Just because
Okay.
they're less, it doesn't mean there's zero.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I went to India. I have family in India, so we talked to them. They helped me find a tutor. I then hired them for 36 hours a week of
Mm-hmm.
classes. And we just had classes 6 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Okay. Okay.
And so we had 3 hours in the morning. They came to the house. They'd come over. We have 3 hours
Mm-hmm.
in the morning. I'd go upstairs, eat lunch, go back downstairs. 3 hours more class. I would do some homework. It was just very, very intensive. So that
Wow.
a bit of infrastructure, like a framework.
Okay.
So it's still possible. It just means it's a little bit harder to find, and it takes a little bit more time to find those things. That's probably been one of the most recent challenges.
Okay. Now, do you still follow that same language learning structure right now, or how have you honed in, modifying that infrastructure? Because I know I get up in the morning. I am more of a morning person for language learning, but I've noticed I can also do that in the evenings after, like maybe a nap. So do you have a specific schedule now? Has that changed?
So let's start with Gujarati. For Gujarati, I don't do any study. I do virtually nothing.
Of
Virtually nothing
course.
because
Yeah.
there's no infrastructure that I've established here in Calgary. There's
Mm-hmm.
certain ones that don't work for me that they work temporarily, and I know they work temporarily, then I stop doing them, or they don't want to do them anymore. Or so, for example, taking private classes is never something that lasts for the long term for me. I take lots of private classes, but they're always in bursts. I'll
Okay.
take them, then I stop. And I still enjoy taking them, but I usually know in advance that I'm probably going to stick with it for a month or two, and it's not going to be something long term, and I just take advantage of that month or two.
Okay.
But I don't have anything per se in Calgary right now for Gujarati.
Mm-hmm.
For other languages, so Mandarin, for example, that's probably the primary focus of my attention nowadays.
Awesome.
There's a Mandarin program offered at the local university in my city.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically I'm enrolled in their Mandarin program, in their East Asian language program, I should say.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It's the name of the department, but there's a concentration in Mandarin. So almost everything I take is a Mandarin class, essentially language class or literature class, things of that nature. I
Mm.
only take one class a semester, so
Okay.
it'll take me forever to actually finish the program, but that's not the point. The point is
Absolutely.
that there's a class. If I don't go, they will kick me out. I have
Mm-hmm.
to maintain certain grades. I'm a little bit competitive as well. So I'll see other people succeeding and I'll want to succeed in the class. So that'll
Absolutely.
make me go. It'll make me study. And even if I get a C in the class, me to earn that C was way more than I would have done if I didn't take the class. So that's what I'm doing for Mandarin. The biggest thing I do.
Okay. So you pretty much really stick to a very regimented type of structure when it comes to your language learning.
For the most part, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to be, that's a good question. I think so. That sounds about right, but there's a small caveat. I think there are certain people who are very regimented in the sense that they're self-motivated. Like they come home, they do their program at 7 p.m. and they're very self-driven. My
Mm-hmm.
structures tend to come from the things around me. And so sometimes those structures change
Okay.
because that infrastructure changed. So
Mm-hmm.
a great example would be Mandarin as well. So one thing that I do as well is every single week I run a Mandarin conversation group.
Oh, awesome.
And because that now it's part of the routine, that's a thing that's there.
Okay.
For example, here's a great example. If next semester, if the Mandarin classes offered really clash with my work schedule, I
Mm-hmm.
probably won't be able to take any classes. In which
Okay.
case, I'll probably not be studying Mandarin very much unless I happen to find another external structure, whether it's classes, whether it's maybe I even meet a girl and I have a girlfriend. Now I have a real reason, like, oh, that's what needs to, now I need to learn it. Like you don't know, right? Like I usually almost always I need something outside of myself
Okay.
to give me a good reason to actually either a good reason to learn the language, aka a girlfriend, for example,
Okay.
or it gives me a certain level of accountability, aka classes at the university.
Okay. Well, that's definitely having a female friend or female companion is definitely a type of accountability there.
For sure. Yeah,
So,
I suppose so. Yeah.
so do you believe in these new what they call methods? And today's world we call them hacks. So I know that there's a method called laddering, which you use a foreign language to learn another language. Do you believe in these type of hacks? Because I'm more traditional and structured when it comes to language learning. I see that you have some regimented aspects depending on environment. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, if it works for you, do it.
Well,
Do it.
that's definitely simple.
Try it for a month. If you don't like it, stop. Try for 2 months. You don't like it, adjust it, change it. If it's working, great. If it's not, don't do it.
Now, when you have your students, because I understand you have a learning school, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So do you have students who approach you that have some type of anxiety in reference to language learning? Because people think that there's this immaculate or some spiritual gene that comes with language learners.
Yeah.
My thing is you have to learn it. So
It's
how do you
fun.
get them to relax and say, this is what we're going to do?
I tell them this is what we're gonna do. And I say today we're focusing on this. They feel how they feel. I share my perspective, and if they don't believe me, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't force someone to feel a certain way. All I can do is share what I think is true, and then they're gonna do what they want to do with it, and then they're gonna move on, and they're gonna make whatever decision they want to make. I'll just share what I believe is true, and then they're gonna share what they believe is true, and if they can't get over it, I mean, well, what can I do? I can help them think of some strategies that tend to work, or I can help them problem solve it. There's a lot of things we can do, but at the same time, at the end of the day, if I see someone 2 hours a week, they're spending, how many hours are there in a week? 24 times 7. What is that? It's like close to 175-ish, something like that.
Yes.
Something like that. 170 something hours.
Yes. So know that it's
Out of
time
the
you have to put in
175 hours,
that work.
Sorry?
You've got to put in that work, basically.
Yeah, it could be the work, or it could be sometimes, yeah, if they want to get over that anxiety, they got to take the effort to do so. And then some people, it's not, so there's a lot to unpack here. Some people don't have an extreme anxiety. It's just kind of a minor thing. And so why should they put extreme work into it? It doesn't matter. It's like they feel nervous, but it's like a normal amount of nerves. Why should they not be nervous at all? Some people have crippling anxiety, but that's not very common. That's not very common at all. Some people feel not too nervous, which is great. So I think if you feel a certain level of nerves, do you have to really work on that? Maybe not. That's pretty normal. Like if someone said to me, okay, oh my God, I get so scared when I talk to native speakers, but you're a beginner. Well, of course you feel scared. I mean, everyone's going to feel scared. Some people won't. But I do too. Like, I mean, of course you're like, what am I going to tell you? Like, don't talk. I mean, yeah, I mean, you probably shouldn't put yourself in a lot of situations like that then if you're not ready for it. What else can I say?
Now, since you are adding more languages to your plate, and I know that you travel, do you normally wait till you're somewhat proficient before you travel to another country to practice, or you just totally immerse, just go with what you got and just go from there?
I've done a bit of both, so I'll walk you through some different trips. I've done it different ways, different times, and there's been different experiences and different outcomes each time, depending on how I've done it.
Okay.
The very first time I did it was when I was 15. I was forced. I didn't want to do it, but I was forced by my mum.
Okay.
And I went to France. And I had a reasonably strong level of French prior to going. I'd done all of my education in French at that point, or almost most of my education in French. So I was reasonably strong. I would probably say somewhere between a B1 and a B2.
Okay.
If I had to take a guess, I don't fully remember because it was 13 years ago or 12, 13 years ago. But regardless, reasonably strong. And when I came back, shortly after returning, I went and wrote a B2 exam, and I passed without extreme difficulty. So that's a pretty good thing. 3 months in the country.
That's awesome. That's intense.
That's awesome. That's really good. That's amazing. Right? So I was probably like a B1.7 if I had to guess, or B1.5, and then, or B1.8, like kind of B1 plus, I guess we could call it. And when I came back after a little bit of, not immediately, but shortly after coming back, I don't remember the exact timeline, but shortly after, maybe a year after, something like that, I went and wrote my B2 exam. When I was 17, I went to Peru, I was very beginner in Spanish, and I did one or 2 weeks of intensive classes while I was there, and then I did just a tour as well, where I practiced with a guide, things of that nature. That helped a lot as well, but I was not like fluent after a month. Like it was not a huge, it was not, yeah, it was not like, oh my God, now I'm super amazing after a month. I continued. So basically there, I think the biggest things that helped me were I got a good grasp on a lot of pronunciation things. I learned a lot of vocabulary. I mean, it's just like learning, just standard learning. Think of just taking classes, but more intense.
So,
Go
so
ahead.
it was intense for you, and would you say everybody should start with the alphabet at least first? Because I think so, but everybody's different.
I think generally speaking, yes, having a good understanding of the sounds of the language is a good idea. Generally, yes, that's right. There will be outliers, there will be exceptions to that, but for the majority of people, yeah, you should have some concept of the sounds of the language. You don't need to be perfect. I think that's where I might be a little different. I don't really think you need to be, I think of certain people I've met or talked to or read about who might think you should really put a heavy focus on pronunciation first, which is fine. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I don't think everyone has to put a heavy focus, but everyone should have some fundamental knowledge of, in my perspective, most people should have a fundamental knowledge of the sounds of the language early on.
Okay. That's a lot to take in, and you are definitely doing what Azren, the language nerd, is absolutely doing, and you're doing some amazing stuff. So what's next for Azren?
What's next? Keep going with, so language-wise, keep going with Mandarin. Keep chipping away. I will move on to Gujarati at some point when there's an opportunity that I see that comes up where that creates a structure around it for me. Right now, there's not. The only thing I can see right now to create structure is if I start teaching it. That'll force me to learn. Because then someone's relying on me to teach them. So then I have to be on my game. That's the only thing I see that could right now. Non-language wise, so work wise, just keep finding more students, keep growing, slowly but surely, chip away.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you have been absolutely amazing, and tell us where we can find you.
At Polyglot Azren, or Azren the Language Nerd. That's spelled AZ or Z, depending on your country. REN.
Alrighty. And we can find you on YouTube and Anchor. Is that right?
Anywhere. Any network that exists, I'm there. So Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, podcast, YouTube, whatever exists, I'm there.
That is awesome. Azren, as always, you are amazing. We just love you out here in the language space, and you keep doing what you're doing.
Why? Thank you.
Well, we love you here at Global Dynica, and we will talk to you soon.
See you.